In no time, they headed to the hospital, eager to get a pregnancy test done. After providing a urine sample, they waited. And waited. The minutes ticked by at a glacial pace. Sophia stared into space, her mind racing with mixed emotions. Thoughts swirled in her head like a whirlwind. She watched the clock, her eyes fixed on its steady tick-tock, tick-tock. How would she care for a child if the test came back positive? She was still reeling from her recent trauma and struggling with depression. The thought of raising a child felt overwhelming, even insane. How would she provide for it when she could barely take care of herself? She had just landed a job, but hadn't received her first paycheck yet. The responsibilities of parenthood loomed large, and Sophia felt suffocated by the mere possibility. As the wait stretched to an hour, Sophia's frustration mounted. "Why is this taking so long?" she muttered to herself. Her eyes still fixed on the clock, she tapped her foot impatiently. Her hands clenched into fists. The silence in the room was oppressive, punctuated only by the steady tick-tock of the clock. Just then, the doctor emerged with a solemn expression, beckoning them to his office. He handed her the test results, and Sophia's shaky hands struggled to hold the report. It slipped from her grasp multiple times, like a leaf on a windy day. Finally, she placed it on the table, her palms sweaty with nervousness. The doctor's gaze encouraged her to open it, but Sophia hesitated, paralyzed by fear. Emily too was on edge, her eyes wide with anxiety. She reached out and placed a supportive hand on Sophia's shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "It's going to be okay, Sophia," she whispered. "We'll face this together." Sophia nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. I just can't," she whispered, attempting to rise from her seat and flee the office. But Emily firmly pulled her back down. "Sit down, gather some courage. It's not the end of the world." Emily's words were stern but supportive. Sophia sat, still trembling. She took a deep breath, her heart racing in her chest. "What does it say, doctor?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. The doctor glanced at her, his eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Miss Maxwell, it's literally right in front of you, ma'am. You can check it yourself." "You don't need me to tell you," the doctor responded politely, his voice calm and gentle, as he pointed to the file with a nod of his head. Sophia gulped, her throat dry with anxiety, her Adam's apple bobbing up and down as she swallowed hard. She fearfully and shakily took the paper and opened it slowly, her eyes closed as if praying for a miracle, her eyelids squeezed tight in a desperate attempt to ward off the truth. She opened her eyes, then closed them again, hesitating, her mind racing with thoughts and doubts. Finally, she gathered the courage to open her eyes and check the result, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. As she did, tears ran down her cheeks like a stream, flowing freely and unchecked. Her face contorted in a mixture of shock, grief, and despair. This was what she was terrified of. The reality of it hit her right in the face, like a slap or a punch, leaving her breathless and reeling. "Pam, you are 4 weeks pregnant, ma'am," the doctor stated blankly, his voice devoid of emotion, his words dropping like a bombshell into the silence of the room. He looked into her eyes and saw shock, fear, and nervousness, his gaze softening with compassion and understanding. He knew she wasn't ready for the news. She wasn't. "Congratulations, ma'am," he added, closing his file and stretching out his hands in a gesture of goodwill. His voice a little softer now, a little more gentle. Sophia's response was immediate and fierce. Her anger and frustration boiling over like a pot left unattended on the stove. Congratulations? Are you telling me congratulations, Doctor? Do I look happy to you? Do I look freaking excited that I'm going to have a child, Doctor? Do I? She yelled, her voice echoing off the walls of the office, her words tumbling out in a torrent of emotion. The doctor looked at her in shock at her outburst, his eyes wide with surprise, his face pale with concern. But he continued to fuel her anger and frustration, his heart going out to her in a wave of sympathy and understanding. Well, ma'am, technically you're not pregnant with one child. You are pregnant with two, he said with a faint smile, his voice a little softer now, a little more gentle, as if trying to soften the blow. Sophia looked at him, confused, her eyes wide with disbelief, her mind reeling with the implications. What? What do you mean by two, Doctor? I mean, you're telling me I'm having twins? Oh my God. Her voice trailed off, as the shock of what she heard made her feel lightheaded, her vision blurring at the edges, her body swaying slightly in her seat. The doctor and Emily were fast enough to grab her as she fainted, her body going limp in their arms, her head lolling to one side like a rag doll. Sophia, please, please, wake up. Emily's voice was the last thing she heard before she lost consciousness, her words echoing in Sophia's mind like a mantra. In the next few minutes, Sophia woke up, her head pounding like a drum, her mind foggy and disoriented. The light was too bright for her to see, so she closed her eyes a bit, trying to shield them from the harsh glow. She realized she was still in the hospital, lying in the hospital bed, and Emily was by her side, her head bowed down as if in prayer. Sophia's eyes flooded open, and she saw Emily's worried face, her brow furrowed with concern. Sophia tapped Emily gently, trying to rouse her, her hand trembling with weakness. Emily, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her throat dry and scratchy. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with excitement and relief. You're up, she exclaimed, her voice full of warmth and concern. She brushed aside Sophia's hair, her touch gentle and soothing, and checked her temperature, her fingers cool and calm. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Tell me exactly how you're feeling, Emily asked, her voice soft and sympathetic, her words tumbling out in a gentle stream. Sophia tried to get up, leaning to the edge of the bed, her body feeling heavy and weak, her muscles aching with fatigue. She winced, her head spinning, her vision blurry. What happened? She asked, her mind racing with questions and doubts, her thoughts jumbled and confused. Emily's face was etched with worry, her eyes filled with compassion. You passed out, Sophia, when you heard the news, she explained, her voice soft and gentle, her words dripping with empathy. And then it hit her again, the news. She was having twins. 2 babies were growing inside of her, and the thought was overwhelming, too much to bear. Tears streamed down her face again, hot and bitter, her body shaking with sobs. No, 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 she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion, her heart breaking into a million pieces. This cannot be happening to me. This is nothing but a prank. It's just a joke, right? It is just a joke. I do not have kids. I do not have 2. It's just a joke, right? Please tell me it's just a joke. The doctor entered the room, his face concerned, his eyes soft with compassion, his expression a mixture of sympathy and understanding. He held the phone in his hand, his gaze fixed on Sophia's face, his eyes filled with kindness. He knew she wasn't happy, and with his knowledge of physiology, He knew she was depressed and broken. The thought of having a child had made her worse. So I suggested something, he said, his voice gentle, his words dripping with empathy. Do you want to get an abortion? Sophia's response was barely audible, her voice a soft whisper, her words barely escaping her lips. I don't know. The doctor nodded, his eyes understanding, his face filled with compassion. But remember, the father of the child needs to be aware of this abortion and sign some papers, he explained, his voice soft and gentle, his words a gentle breeze on a summer day. He wrote something in his file, his pen scratching against the paper, the sound echoing through the silence. Sophia's heart ached at the mention of the father, her mind flashing back to the night she got pregnant, her thoughts a jumbled mess of pain and regret. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her body shaking with sobs, her heart break into a million pieces. I don't know the father, doctor, she blurted out, her voice cracking with emotion, her words tumbling out in a torrent of pain. The doctor looked at her, confused, his eyes pausing for a beat, his face filled with concern. He wanted to ask more, but it wasn't part of his job. His patient's personal issues were not his concern, unless they chose to share them with him. And at the looks of things, Sophia did not want to open up. Her heart closed off.